have on with me today to try and dissect this subject. We have Dave Slocombe from Race Yourself, which is a very innovative platform around your own personal experience in sport as a participant. We'll hear more about that later. And we have Lucien on my right here from Havas. We have Matt Rogan from Two Circles. And we have late stand-in Ben Hattan from Raptor. So could you guys just give us an introduction to your roles and what your businesses do?
Yeah, okay. Hi everyone. So I'm running Havas Sports Entertainment, which is the specialized division of Havas, the fifth largest communications group, and Havas Sports Entertainment specialized in sports entertainment across 25 markets. We help brands to connect with fans via their passions, and we mainly operate through sports, music, video games, movies, and our largest client worldwide is Coca-Cola.
Morning everyone, my name's Matt Rogan, as you know. We set Two Circles up just under 3 years ago to work exclusively with sports rights holders to help them make pragmatic and then commercial sense of the data they hold on behalf of their customers, to use that to drive their own direct revenue streams, to activate intelligently for sponsors, to navigate the mess that most of them find themselves in with regards to systems they currently have in the organisation, and ultimately to drive commercial advantage, whether that's more people on a tennis court, which drives funding from the government, or that's more people in the turnstiles and more season tickets retained. A function of perhaps the demand of the market, and hopefully the fact we've run a good business, is we're now 44 people from a standing start, which gives you a sense of where the market's at, as did hopefully us winning Agency of the Year at Sports Industry Awards last week. It's a new world, and that's why we see a lot of faces here.
Morning, everyone. My name's Ben Hattan. I'm the European General Manager for Raptor Sports Properties. We are principally an investment group based out of Boston in Massachusetts. Amongst other things, we are the majority shareholder in Italian Serie A club AS Roma. I stepped into this panel because we have a passionate belief that data is of growing importance, consumer data. The more you can know about more people, then the better chance you've got of growing revenues.
Morning, hi, I'm Dave Slocombe. I'm VP of Product at Race Yourself. Race Yourself believes that fitness can be fun and social, and we're creating the world's first gamified fitness platform for Google Glass, smartwatches, and your mobile that helps you to race with celebrities, race your friends, race zombies, to kind of motivate you to get off the couch and have fun, but also kind of, race celebrities can help train you and guide you towards your next fitness goal. So that's what we're about.
There's a great video, by the way, of showing you exactly what that is on YouTube, which maybe Dave, you can share the sort of.
Sure, in the break, come and find me.
Yeah. So I thought to start off, we'd sort of try and hit the big question first, which is what is big data in the context of sports? I think there's a number of different ways you can look at it, but I think let's just ask the panel where they feel big data is in the context of sports. Lucien,
Okay. Well, I think that big data reflects the scale of sports when it comes to major events and participations, and the communities that love sports and are part of a database, but also the audience of sports. So one good way to see that is thinking of the Olympic Games as a global platform that has to be delivered across so many countries and connecting so many people with the sports performance. One company, Atos, is the top sponsor of the IOC, helping to deliver the games, and those business technologies that are helping putting together the games has to deliver in real times trillions of data to put this together when it comes to security, when it comes to organization, but also when it comes to media flows. And a few figures will give you what big data can be today. Actually, the number of data that has been managed from one game to another has increased by 1,400% in 10 years, 1,400%, which is an amazing figures, meaning that they have connected more than 8 billion devices around the world in real time during the Sochi Games a couple of months ago. And during this time, 7 billion unique visitors were hosted in the cloud that was managed for the Olympic Games. So it gives you the magnitude of this kind of thing. And for the one, and maybe Dave can tell us exactly what it means or yourself, but there have been more than 15 terabytes of data that have been processed just for the results of the games, which is, I think, telling you a little bit what the magnitude of data can be when it comes to sports.
So those numbers sound pretty big, don't they?
I mean, my favourite story about the Winter Olympics is so IBM pulled out, I believe, of being an Olympic sponsor after Lillehammer because it couldn't handle the amount of data that needed processing. That data, something to purchase on eBay would now allow you to process that amount of data, cost you about 25 quid. Just gives you a sense of the pace of change. I guess within the context of our world, it's kind of big data with inverted commas, really. So the average number of data sources that the Premier League clubs we work with have is somewhere between 45 and 47. So football clubs, cricket clubs, rugby clubs have footsie levels of data, but they're actually SMEs in terms of their commercial operation. So it's about understanding which of those divergent sources of data are actually relevant to what you're looking to achieve, rather than getting worried about the overall scale of the numbers. But even at that level, some of the analytics you can do are interesting and fairly straightforward. So to what extent will the fact we are, touch wood, going to have a heat wave over the next 3 days drive attendances for the launch of NatWest T20 Blast this weekend? And what does that mean for the number of toilets, portable toilets, that some of the smaller counties need? It's big data, is it? I don't know. That's the kind of thing that you can get into quite easily.
Yeah. So Ben, from your position, obviously, you own a sports club, so you know what all the data sources are within a club.
Sure.
Does that number sound right? And what sort of data is it?
From our perspective, to answer the first question about big data, from our perspective, big data is really how we go from being a small club in Rome to being able to play on the global stage. We play in a stadium with 60-odd thousand seats. We have just a little short of 30,000 season ticket holders every year, but we have in excess of 2 million likes on Facebook and well in excess of 1 million followers on Twitter. And that's important to us because all of a sudden here's some folk who are proactively choosing to engage with us that to date we have had no way of getting to know them, no way of firstly identifying them and then going through that process of communicating with them and engaging with them. And ultimately, as we push forward, how do we use data to better understand that bigger group of people such that we can transact with them? In terms of data sources, one thing I would say that the number sounds absolutely right, but what's more frightening is that that's growing every day. That the number of opportunities we have to interact with our fans is growing, and what we're trying to do, and I think what sports properties need to do better, is understand how to maximise every one of those touch points, because you don't get that many opportunities to take a new fan and what I would call capture him such that you can engage with him in a sensible, sustainable relationship. So to us, that's big data.
Yeah.
So I think if I look at it from a sort of technology point of view, we see that I think the biggest disruption that's heading our way is really the Internet of Things, the quantified self, where that is the person is now dressing themselves in sensor technology. The teams are using it for training, the individuals are using it for activities and for fun, and this is now giving us access to a whole body area network of data. And you're connecting that up to, instead of just having, say, one tweet from a person, you have every kind of GPS point they've ever done in a sports activity, their velocity, the impact strike strength of their foot on the floor. There's so many new technologies coming out where you can get sources of data that this is the biggest kind of new step that's going to be coming. So, I mean, we're working with a company, SensorTex. They have a pair of socks that you put on, and they sort of map how your foot is hitting the floor. So for runners, if your heel's striking, that's bad. And they can tell you in real time whilst you're doing it. But then imagine aggregating all of the data for everybody's footstep in London. I mean, that kind of data itself would be phenomenally large. So that, coupled with heart rate, coupled with blood pressure, all of these things are huge new opportunities to, A, engage with people and create new technologies and new platforms for people, but are also enhance that challenge that we're going to have about managing it.
Yeah. And if I can add something on this, because from a communications point of view, I think what is important is the scale of the usage of those tools. Today, actually half of the population will have a smartphone, the world population by 2016, which means that everyone has, and the statistic for the 18 to 44% age group is 22 hours of activity for everyone. So it means anytime, everywhere for everyone. But then the wearable, the Internet of Things is going to change everything. And to your point, when it's going to be massively expanded, people expect more than 50 billion connected devices across the world. 50 billion connected devices, which means an average of 6.5 per person. So you're going to have the possibility to be connected to the same platforms, and I guess that the social media is certainly the glue of everything, but basically this means that you can have a lot of personalization when the data can be processed, because basically everything is being digital, everything can be individuals. And one last interesting fact, at the last Super Bowl, they hit a record in terms of the number of tweets that were tweeted per 60 seconds. The average tweet per 60 seconds is 100,000. During the game, it was almost 400,000. And I think the record was 24 million tweets during the game. But every tweet can be tracked, and every tweet can be identified with a level of influential that everyone has with the followers, meaning that one tweet can be one person or 1 million person. And you can manage the data in a way that it can be very meaningful for a communications point of view. As far as I'm concerned, this is my angle, because you can have demographics that are completely updated in real time, but also very personalized. Yeah. That asks a lot of questions when you think about, let's say, privacy and some kind of, that there are some hurdles ahead, but I think it shows the potential. And when your great products are going to be massively distributed, we can imagine what you can do with that.
Yeah. So I mean, it sounds like, you know, this big data, gigantic data, you know, mass data. It's possibly too much data in terms of what you can do with it. And so I think I was at a round table the other day and we were talking about the idea of little data, and are there little things that you can do from the data? Like maybe Matt, you can start with this in terms of like what could a sports brand do quickly to sort of, rather than get sort of swamped in the mass of data? What can they do with smart data?
Well, data is one of those areas, at least in the rights holder perspective, which is a classic Pareto's law. So 80% of the commercial values and 20% of the data sources. And the fundamental way to stop wasting time is just ask the chief exec of the sport what their top 3 objectives are for the organisation in the next 3 years, and just build a strategy that delivers the data against those to help them make smart decisions. So in most instances, in a global governing body, that will be, how do we, in a fragmented universe, help us develop a direct-to-consumer digital TV broadcast that stops us being as reliant on Eurosport because they don't want to show us, and when they do, it's at midnight. In a commercial football club environment, although not this one, it will be around how do we stop season ticket holders lapsing because we have a sense, but we don't know why, that our season ticket base is a leaky bucket. Or what, you know, right now our sponsor revenue with exactly the same inventory needs to double in 4 years. So from those 45 sources you start off with, you get down to a world where you say, okay, so these are the 6 or 7 things that are fundamentally important to us. Now let's go working out what happens when we put them together and how we can do some quick and easy things. In a Championship, Division 1, 2, 3 as of this week, football club environment, if I could pick one thing, it would be trying to run more smarter match day surveys and put those across your transactional ticket base to understand not what your whole customer base is saying or thinking or feeling, but what small segments of that are doing and how you understand how you can influence that.
Yeah.
It's a long sentence without breath.
Yeah. So, Ben, I was just wondering, from Raptor's point of view, obviously, you're looking at that data from the club's perspective. There's possibilities of productizing that, I guess, for other customers that you have. Are there sort of key points, data points that your other customers might be interested in?
Oh, yeah, I think the answer, I'd echo what Matt said in many respects, that when we started this process in Rome, we took a look at the business, and we're not in a position where we sell out our stadium every week, and right there then is our single biggest priority. How do we sell more tickets? And that then is all about using data. Why do folk come to our games? Why don't they come to our games? We have lots of fans in Rome that have never been to the Olympic Stadium, and I think as you translate that out into the wider world of sports properties, I think you'll find very few properties will tell you anything other than their single biggest challenge is to increase the live audience, because ultimately that's the quickest way to increase revenues. Sure. So that's where we're out talking about our platform to other customers, but it's based on the very real experience that is big data is one thing, but it's little data that's important. It's seeing the wood for the trees and using those small snippets of additional insight or information to really make a difference to revenues. And most chief executives will give you their top 3 priorities over the next 3 years, but I think you'll find very few chief executives will then say, and by the way, we can wait 3 years to see any noticeable difference in revenues.
Maybe.
They're all
That's
the same.
right.
They'll invest provided they see results a week on Thursday.
Yeah, I do think I think traditionally in the rights holder space, the industry has been predicated on tickets. And fundamentally, that's because the agency supply into rights holders has been resellers of ticketing systems. So all roads lead to Rome. If you look at any more established sporting P&L, though, I think the sponsorship component within the context of big data, the way in which sports rights holders, frankly, stop doing a pathetic job engaging with brands, is absolutely fundamental, because 20 million quid's worth of incremental sponsorship is 19 million quid's worth of incremental profit, as distinct from the additional costs of putting another 200 people through a venue like this on a Saturday. So I think fundamentally it's been a ticketing-driven approach to big data and CRM in the sports space, but it won't last.
Yeah, so we're basically talking now about big data in its application within the business side of sports. So I guess one of the things that was in my previous role at Man City, one of the things that we talked about was fan relationship management, FRM, rather than maybe CRM. Lucien, maybe would you like to talk a little bit about that, the change in mindset there?
Well, yes, I think that sports is a product or is a service that is not consumed the same way as many others, because there is an emotional part which is very, very strong, which means that the engagement level make people consume or be attached to their passion in a very, very different way than it's just rational or something that can be useful. So basically, this means that the logic of engagement of everyone might be a good way to make the approach more relevant for brands especially, but also when it comes to the loyalty of fans to one property or another. So with this in mind, and especially because it's becoming so important in the transaction for a brand with a property, there is much more to gain than just the ticketing aspect. I think that the attachment and the engagement is really the most important thing. But as long as you know what people expect when it comes to fanship. And I think that to structure properly a fan relationship management policy, you need first to really dig further under the skin of the fans and understand what a fan is. And actually, there are many, many different types of fans. We have started the research at a global level on this topic with the University of South California, who specialize in this in entertainment. And actually, they have learned a lot working for the studios on how to evolve TV series, which character you're going to kill, which you're going to keep, because people are expecting those people to be in the next seasons, and the way they manage the understanding of fans is quite a good learning for us. What we've learned from that is basically there are 5 categories of fans you can imagine, and 5 logics of engagement. There is a logic of entertainment, which is basically we love the show, we love the game, so people go to watch something that they really love. And those fans are different from the one that comes from the logic of identification, the one that really identify themselves with their heroes and that will definitely invest a lot of their time and money to be like their heroes. So they will be certainly more interested in buying the services, buying the products. You have the fans that have the logic of mastery. They are the experts. They know better than the scriptwriter, they know better than the coach, and they are going to play a role which is even more important in the image of the club or the property. So those fans need to be treated a very, very different way because their influence is very important and they can be very negative as well. But on the other side, those guys, the experts, can be very interested by products that you have because they want to measure their own performance against their heroes. And in some sports like golf, for example, it's very important to see yourself with pros and things like that. Your approach to pros is very important. You have also the logic of social connection. People will go to their passion to meet other people that have the same passion. And those people are quite important when it comes to the community leverage effect, because they are going to speak their ideas to be more influential than the others. So when you think of the fanship, they are going to be posting, creating content, retweeting all the time. So if you do something, they are going to influence. And lastly, you have the logic of immersion, which is quite interesting. It's where you're going to lose yourself in your passion just to forget the rest of your life. So those people are quite radical, but they're quite intense in the way they will also overconsume. And when it comes back to the different proposition you can make for products and services, if you think of, you go to the game, you go to the Emirates Stadium, and you are in this last logic, the logic of immersion, you are really the one type of consumer that is going to be here very early, even before you are going to consume it, because you want to know what's going on. So basically, you will be very interested if you receive some pre-program through the different social media, and you're going to start chatting with other people much before the game starts, and very much later on. And if you think of one thing, which is the Instagram of this world, people are very keen to show their passion and share their passion, and photo is a very important part of it. So basically those guys, the immersion guy, will make a lot of photos on themselves, share a lot of those photos, and produce a lot of content which is very simple, but that is going to leverage the brand that they are attached to. So you see these different logics will help to draw the framework that then is going to be managed on the real time with a lot of algorithm and capabilities to make them relevant and smart.
So I think we're getting now into the area of insight and interpreting the data. So obviously a clear, you can capture the data, you can get that data into some sort of bucket that you can then do something with. But I just wanted to go back to the point that you mentioned about sort of people wanting to sort of measure themselves against celebrities, and that's something I guess that Race Yourself does, Dave. It's not just bringing you in for a bit because you've not spoken for a few minutes, but just tell us a little bit about that aspect, and is that a new area of growth particularly, and how does the data element of that?
So, I'm going to take a couple of cues from what you were talking about there. We approach the customer base from a game kind of background. So there's 4 types of game players in the world. There's the killers who want to win or lose, and they want to know that I've beaten this person or I've lost to them fair and square. There's the achievers. They want to have rank and level up and get badges and rewards. You've got your explorers. They like to go around, try lots of different things. And you've got your socializers who like to measure themselves against their social impact. So I think that's quite a nice sort of set that goes alongside yours. connecting that into, that's how people engage with content from a brand. So, you can be engaging with, a mainstream brand through their TV or watching the Tour de France. Then you want to get outside and get on your bike and try it out. And your experience of engaging with that brand the opportunity is to keep that connection going through mobile, through wearable technology, and the way we see the new kinds of interfaces like the Google Glass, where you can see your celebrity or you can train with them to actually take that outside of the traditional media channels and continue that experientially through your lifestyle. And you try and engage with that kind of customer or the user from children to adults, whatever, through their behaviors. Not necessarily, I think marketing has traditionally taken the approach of demographics and going postcoding and net worth and, what car do they buy, where do they live, and that's where they fit and that's how we'll sell to them. Actually, people change behaviors all the time. And they evolve, and they have aspirations, and they will move from one kind of group to another kind of group, depending on what kind of brand it is. So if we're looking at the way big data and little data can help us as a company create relevant content and product, we connect up their actual behaviors to the other data we know about them. So traditionally, you may have like 50 data points about a particular user. Now we can connect up those kind of, name, address, all that kind of basic stuff to, frequency of use, the kind of content channels they use other services to bring in, the other people they follow on Twitter. What does that mean? Bring that into how frequently do they run, or how frequently do they, watch stuff on Netflix. All that kind of stuff helps us create behavioural insights that we can create content around.
So whether you're a participant in sports or a fan of an athlete or a sports brand, I guess it's that passion. I think you mentioned earlier, Lucien, about being involved in sports, and it seems to be that alongside the buzz of the growth in the buzz of big data, it seems to have been fueled obviously by social media. I just wonder, is that absolutely obvious? Is there anything else that's happening there, Matt?
The first thing I'd say, just to connect these 2 points together, and maybe with our world, is you can see from Lucien's research, Dave's been saying, the amount of, firstly, the brands, the amount of intelligence and understanding brands are starting to get an insight into how fans behave. You can see from Dave the kind of quality of intellect and understanding when you start to amalgamate social data that traditional rights holders are able to hold and therefore engage with brands with. And you put that in the context of the traditional sports market, which has been driven by sports research companies building 100-slide decks that tell you whether somebody's more or less likely to buy a Volvo. You can see how there's massive risks that the traditional sports industry just falls a million miles behind and in terms of competition for the brand dollar. So it is, Abby said some of the stuff earlier on, it's completely beholden on the sports rights holder to get its act together quickly and understanding how it manages these divergent data sources to be more compelling to brands, more compelling to its fans, because frankly, they'll take them over us.
Yeah. But is it the fact that it's that passion about a sport that it makes you more likely to share?
Yeah, the great irony is sport in the space in which we operate is at least 10 years behind, and yet once it gets itself together should be the greatest petri dish for the other corporate spaces, because it is so emotive. Yeah. And yet it's held back by some fundamental legacy stuff that it's got to sort out. And when it does, it will be really powerful.
Ben, do you guys link your sort of social media strategy, your sort of outbound messaging to your inbound measurement?
Well, that's a sort of complicated question, really. A couple of things to say on that. First, I think smartphones and wearable technology are changing the world. And sport, at least, is part of that. My children certainly think I'm old-fashioned because I actually talk to people on my telephone, which is something they just struggle to comprehend. And sport is, of course, and you tend to engage in social media around sport, but I think that the whole growth of social media that's convinced us all that there's a whole world out there that are interested in which pub I'm in on a Friday night is a separate behavioural trait entirely.
You do very well if you've got kids and you still get to the pub.
Yeah. I guess, you heard there's an interesting panel earlier that talked, one of the panellists, I can't remember which one it was, talked about this idea of fans, and in fact one of the guys described it as the F word. Fans don't like to be called fans. Well, they may or may not. I could tell you fans hate to be thought of as customers. And in our business, and I can't believe it's different in any other sports property, the challenge of how we turn fans into customers is the single biggest challenge we've got. Of course, we have sports guys that have got to go and win football matches, and some of the performance data, I mean, is mind-blowing in a world that when I started some years ago in football, if you used heart rate monitors to analyse training sessions, you were doing well. But now these guys are using, various bits of nutrition data and distance running and sprint intensities and all that sort of stuff. So from a performance perspective, data's key. But in our business, it's all about how do we turn fans into customers. And some of the stuff that Lucien's doing is fascinating, because you have to understand what makes a fan. And gone are the days where I can go and talk to Vodafone as I did 10 plus years ago with Manchester United and tell Vodafone on slide one that I've got 300 million fans around the world, because the next question is going to be, where are they? Who are they? How do I talk to them as Vodafone? How do I sell them more phones? And, how many one-legged men do you know within a 4-mile radius of your stadium? And that's a particular challenge. And I was with some sponsors not long ago, and they were entirely unanimous in that the sports property that cracks that code for them quickest, that is able to say to them, here's our fan base, here's where they are, here's who they are, here's how they behave, here's what they're liking, disliking, here's how they're spending their time and their money. Oh, and by the way, here's some really effective ways to use our property to communicate with them. Then those properties are going to lead the world, and nobody's doing that yet. And we're trying to do that with data. And equally, we're trying to use data with social media is hugely important. When we bought the business 2 years or so ago, we had no Facebook presence, we had no Twitter presence, and the numbers have shot up considerably. We're now learning how to use those platforms ourselves to outbound communicate. We're learning we've developed technology to help us analyse inbound communications, but we've only done that having built an understanding and a belief in the business that data is important. You can only use technology if you believe data is important. If you don't believe it's important, then all the technology in the world is not going to help you. So that tying fans' activity on social media into and analysing their behaviour is for us really, really important. But only in then how do we take that insight, how do we take that social media behaviour and understand how we can then turn those fans into customers, because ultimately, I think whoever you are, it's about selling more stuff.
Yeah, and I think you mentioned the F word, I was going to use the E word, engagement, and about, you talked about how earlier the key challenge when is selling out the ground, getting that information and knowing how you can maybe convert people to come back to the game. I think just maybe looking at the other big growth in revenues from a CEO, I imagine a lot of Premier League clubs, certainly if you look at the revenue growth of a club like Man City and obviously United with the big deals that they announced this season, you've got that larger focus on sponsorship revenues, and I think with social media you've got that opportunity to not just to measure the CPM or the number of people that are actually that's an eyeball, but how they're participating in that brand communication. Lucien, I wonder, is that?
Well, social is the new currency in the business model anyway, and I think that there will be a shift in the value that brands give to the property from the eyeballs and, let's say, the traditional reach, which goes with the traditional media in a way, and the value of the media rights, to the fact that it's very much some material that they buy when they buy a story, they buy something that they will help them to engage in a very liquid way, meaning that they can use this content in a very, very spreadable way, and it's going to really fit their objectives anytime. One thing you should remember is that basically the fans are not a special species. It's everyone. So basically, a consumer can be looked at as a fan. So if I'm Vodafone, to come back to your point, I look at my consumers, and all of them are fans of something. Maybe not all of Arsenal, or Manchester United, but they all are fans of something. So if I'm a brand, and I try to speak to them, and they try to be a little bit reluctant to let me in, because the big data means Big Brother, means NSA, and you know the story, and people are quite reluctant. And if I am Vodafone, or if I am Barclays, or if I am a brand like they are not especially excited about, why do they let me get engaged? I'm not sure they are. Except when it's about their passion. And the permission factor of passion is immense, and it might become one of the only way for brands to connect with their consumers in a different way than a very strict, rational, and intellectual way. The emotion might come only from that part.
So as an example, say, I don't know, I'm at the FA Cup final, see Arsenal potentially win against Hull, tweet the Budweiser. That value to Budweiser is more valuable.
Exactly. And this value can help Budweiser to have connections with the fans, which is much more than just the time of the game or the time of the match, but it can be kind of a permanent relationship, and that will help them also to manage, and fans management is also about managing it in real time, so they can benefit from the impulse of the emotion of the moment, but also in the longer run, because it goes in kind of the loyalty program. So you have the two dimensions, and that's why you have to be smart, because in one way you have to manage massive quantities of data, and that's where algorithm and mathematicians are absolutely necessary to do that. So you need to address these points with a new kind of people that are going to be the king of the content, because they are going to manage the algorithm. But on the other side, you have to be very witty, you have to be very reactive, you have to be very creative, and you have to get the game, because a machine will never get what is really exciting. So you need to have this creativity connected with the mathematics to make it really relevant and efficient. But that is going to be more, I guess, the story of tomorrow than just capturing with a camera what's going on and feeding a broadcast. That will be multicast, that will be individual cast, that will be really quite exciting. And for brands, sports property represents the source of content that they need to do that. So I think that the value is going to shift very much on the social potential of telling a story, creating content, and connecting through this content.
Yeah. When I've referred to, Matt, I'm just going to bring you in, but I've referred to some of the big Premier League clubs who, you probably imagine that they do have the capacity to be able to analyse this data. But obviously, I think some would suggest that some of maybe the less well-funded sports federations, bodies, or maybe not, Matt. What's your experience of, do other organisations have the capability of actually getting to grips with this data? What have you found?
Well, the first thing to say was just to agree with Lucien. Data in and of itself is useless. Digital and social in and of itself is useless. When you put the two together, you get 1 and 1 leaves about 100. It's no good understanding who the key bits of any demography are unless you can serve the right content to them. There's no sense broadcasting in this brave new world that we live in. Two things, I think. We notice our clients tend to be terrified of this area when we start with them, because there's some legacy stuff, and the legacy stuff might be we can't do anything in this world because our ticketing data's over here, our social data's over here, we're committed to the same hospitality supplier and they own the data for the next 5 years, so there's resistance. Or there's, I've just bought a new system, it's not landed in the organisation, let's put it under that rock. So in the first instance, what we're trying to do is break through a bit of resistance. And the role of the chief exec in supporting that and being open to bare truth is absolutely fundamental. What you then find is a little bit of information can go a long way. Remember the 80-20 piece I mentioned earlier on. And actually some smaller clubs, some smaller federations, some smaller governing bodies can do some fascinating stuff, because traditionally it's been more of a greenfield site. And fundamentally that comes around to the fact this isn't a technology problem, it's a brains problem and a way of looking at the world problem. So do any of you guys embarking on or going back into a working career, arguably what you're looking to find yourself if you're interested in this space is just one of those petri dishes, greenfield site, where you can do some exciting stuff with not a lot and prove yourself that way, rather than becoming a small cog in a big engine.
I mean, your agency is a case in point there, growing from 3 to 40 in, 30 months or something?
33 months, yeah.
And having just won Agency of the Year award at the Sports Industry Awards?
Yes, crossings.
Good
and I guess the thing we're probably proudest of is just that every single client we started with is renewed, which hopefully is a validation of the fact that we've brought talented people in, only about 15% of whom from the sports marketing industry, most of them from corporate, from academia, from research and stuff. And secondly, probably as I mentioned earlier on, just the market moving in a position where it's based on evidence as opposed to instinct, gut feel and politics.
Yeah, I mean it's a growth field. I think the message is it's a massively growing area for people to get involved with.
Just before we move off that, one of the things I think is important to point out around social media is, as sports properties, we have to work much harder in social media because it's fundamentally different to every other piece of inventory we own. So if you think, as AS Roma, every single place just about where our fans congregate in volume, we control the inventory. So we're talking to Budweiser, to Wind, to whoever about how to commercialise the fact that our fans are dwelling in one place. That's not the case in social media. So the example last weekend with Liverpool and Newcastle United, for example, there were 700,000 people around the world did something on Facebook during the 90 minutes of football that was Liverpool versus Newcastle United. 700,000 fans. What did Liverpool do with that? Nothing other than count them. Whereas the platform that is Facebook, they've suddenly got this absolute guaranteed audience for 90 minutes that they can then go and commercialise. So I think the point to leave this particular subject with is the ability to have that data, to analyse that data, and then the understanding and the intellect within the organisation to go and do something with it is hugely important. Otherwise, your digital media group is creating value for somebody else because all they're doing is delivering an audience into one place that somebody else can go and commercialise.
And a lot of those roles haven't previously existed, and they're new roles, and people are investing in that, clubs and federations. So
exactly.
Absolutely right.
So we ended up talking a lot about the business of data, the business of big data, and another aspect is essentially the sort of performance data and the player data, how the data can be used within the game, not just within the business. So, Dave, I think probably a good time to bring you in on this. It's just in terms of your sort of experiences of player type data. We talked about people measuring themselves against celebrities earlier, but what's your view in terms of the way that it can enhance the game?
Sure. Fundamentally our premise is that traditionally people engage with activities. So you get a training plan, then you'll go somewhere, do your running, swimming, football, whatever it is you're training at, and then you'll come back and maybe write some numbers down about how you did, and maybe use an app for that. But fundamentally we think there's a massive opportunity between if you're spending 5 minutes in an app or in a software before a workout, and then you're spending 45 minutes or 2 hours doing the activity, and then there's 5 minutes afterwards where apps are engaging with you afterwards. We think there's a massive period in between when you're doing the activity where you can be the most influenced and get the best guidance. And the thing we hear from anybody across all kinds of sports, well, I mean, fundamentally we're starting with running and cycling, but we've got kind of lots of different sports in the pipeline, is that people don't know how they're performing. People get distracted. They find their performance drops off over time. They're listening to music, they get in the zone, and actually their pace drops, and they don't know, and then they realise at the end, I was getting slower and slower. Whereas we create that kind of motivational reason to keep going. So if you can see the virtual runner running next to you and they're leaving you behind, I'm being left behind here, better get a move on. And putting that in the kind of general context as well, it's about, maybe call it fan life cycle management or customer life cycle management. It's about creating a journey between those different interactions. So connecting with the user or a customer, a fan, during the activity, enhancing that, helping them get value out of it, and rewarding them for their effort. So for us, essentially the journey is there's a trigger. And maybe the trigger is, it could be watching a sports event. It could be that they're part of a training plan. And the trigger is, go out, someone's challenged you to a race. That's the trigger to get going. Then you do your activity. You're being guided along. Hopefully our application will help you know if you're doing better or worse, or helping you, guide you with sensors like heart rate to help you in the right zone so you don't overtrain. Socks that tell you if you're hitting the floor wrong, or if your kick is really powerful or not powerful enough, how that measures against other people to give you a sense of reference. And as humans, we perceive the world as reference. So we compare things. If we compare something to the size of our hand, we compare something to the size of our body, and then we compare it to objects. So we have to use that human language rather than going 2% improvement over 3.6 kilometers. You want to talk about it as, you beat him, or you're doing much better, 10 paces ahead, something more real.
And that's what the data is going to be shown on your Google Glass or some other sort of wearable or...
Yeah, so that whole kind of opportunity to, have fun. A lot of people want distraction from pain when they're training. So I don't know about you, but sometimes it can get a bit boring. After 15 minutes, you're running away, you're cycling away, you're getting tired, you're feeling the pain, you need motivation to keep going. Yeah. So we can sort of inject some motivation to keep going. If you're part of a training plan, it's all about understanding the right frame and the right kind of competition. And hopefully we can make fitness and working out more of a game. Using the kind of social mechanism, being able to me challenge you to a cycle, or me challenge, a famous cyclist to a race, and using their data to actually kind of have that to inspire me to get going. Then we use that kind of also in the home, so using your mobile or your smartwatch to give you if you're more in-depth content. So it could be for cyclists, the turbo trainer session with a famous cyclist in the living room, and then they go out and then they can actually see how they're improving actually out on the road. So connecting that whole kind of life cycle together.
Yeah. So obviously that's your field is very much about that participatory use of data.
Yeah.
Just in terms of the professional athletes, a lot of the data is going to be biometric data, where there's going to be either sort of potential privacy restrictions around that within law. I think there's a part of Perform, we have Opta as one of our business units, which is a leading business in sort of professional sports data. Where do you see the sort of use of player-related data growing as an enhancement to the fan view of the game, and which sports do it well? Obviously you've got sports like Formula One, but where do you think that sort of concept of datainment, which we worked at Manchester City a lot, where do you think that's going?
I think it's unlimited. If you see, I was thinking of the Babola connected racket that helps the professional ATP player, but also anybody to enhance and improve his back or right, whatever. But basically, that is also a way to reconnect this with the game itself and with the virtual game. And I think that when to come back to your point about those professional players, they are the icons, they are the heroes, they are the people that people want to identify with. If you can become one of them, then it's a great moment. We've done something great last year for promoting the new Konami 2014 game, so to compete against the FIFA, which was a quite hard one. What was proposed, and that was in Spain, that the concept of the campaign was enter the game. So we proposed to fans to play games, real games and virtual games. There have been a challenge, and out of 100,000, one guy won, and he was flown to Japan, and he was motion captured, and he has his avatar created, and he became one of the players. So now 9 million people play with him in the game with his heroes, and basically what was fun is that, he was a normal, very good player, but certainly not a football player. But now, as you have his avatar in the same game as Messi and the others, the, professional players that have a contract with Konami, they started to have some comparison between the normal guy and themselves. They play with it to see the difference. So I guess that the data, the digital and those kind of unlimited opportunities to integrate real world and virtual world will also help fans and heroes to get together in another dimension and create a lot of things that even holograms can be put in place in this field, because you can also use the ubiquity possibility of holograms when you can't have the ambassador where you need him, and have him to connect with fan groups even if he's very far away. So there are so many ideas that can be using those technology potential for any connections between the fans and the sports people.
Matt, which sports do you think do it well?
I think there are some pockets of football starting to do it well. I think the key thing is, to Lucien's research really, there's a certain constituent base of a fan, supporter, customer base for any sport which is going to be phenomenally interested in it. So, for example, you guys at City developed City Geeks, wasn't it? A Twitter feed that was specifically focused on those people who were absolutely all over it. Chelsea do an excellent job of it, with a debrief on the tactics in and around every Chelsea game, which is written by a guy called Pat Nevin, who's my hero. He was a winger for Chelsea far too many years ago. But they do a very bad job of publicising it, but a very good job of creating the content. And in that after-game analytics piece, I think for a certain constituent base, it'd be very, very powerful. And I imagine where it will end up going is ultimately where you can listen to different audio feeds against the TV feed of any Premier League football game, where you can actually just have a feed that's pure tactics and less inane dribble, and one that's more mainstream.
I think Gary Neville's done a brilliant job as well.
He has done a brilliant job of it.
To a sort of mainstream with his work with Sky.
But that's the minute that my wife wants to turn the football off. She'll cope with it till then, but when it gets tactical, she's not interested. But I really am, so that's the point. I get put in the back room.
Don't say that. It's all about data. Ben?
I mean, we have a conflict in our football club, really, that as business guys, we see the tremendous value with some of this content and how the game was won based on individual player performances and all that sort of stuff. The conflict we have is with our coach, who believes that every piece of performance data, whether it's before the game or after the game, will give somebody somewhere a competitive advantage the next time they play football.
I've just been told that we've only got 5 minutes, so I should really open it to the floor.
So just the last point I was going to make is that a sport that's, I think, using data really well to enhance the consumer experience or the fan experience is sailing. A lot of the telemetry information that comes off boats and some of the stuff they're doing with that to really bring that sport to life, I think, is tremendous.